Hello and welcome to the Risk and Resilience Insight interviews. I'm Grant Kennedy, Managing Director at KRisk. Today we have Lewis Cooper. Thank you for joining us, Lewis. If you wouldn't mind just giving us a brief background of your history and experience around your roles and its alignment to risk management, that would be great.
Hi, Grant. Yes, thank you for this opportunity. I'm the CEO of the Non-Executive Directors Association and helped to set the organisation up in terms of helping NEDs from cradle to grave. My own background is I started life as an accountant, worked for the big four accounting firms in various guises, and moved very quickly from audits and the numbers into consulting, particularly around governance, risk and assurance services. And I currently also do a lot of work around risk management in terms of advising people on their maturity around where they are in the risk perspective and how they're going to develop their risk management activities going forward. And I've been a member of the IRM for a number of years and helped to set up the innovation SIG, which has now been going on for a number of years. So I come at it from a board and a risk perspective in terms of my own background experience.
Brilliant, thank you. So today the focus of the theme is going to be around non-executive directors and the association with risk management. So we've got a few questions that we're going to ask you in a minute, but first of all, a little bit more insight into yourself, like we ask everybody else. So what's the riskiest thing that you've ever done and what makes you resilient as a person?
Interesting, because I struggle to think about the riskiest thing because I'm a boring accountant, so I've mainly been in the office and dealing with sort of numbers and stuff. But I did have a really interesting assignment with De Beers, the diamond people in South Africa. We were doing some work around their risk management and security activities in London. And they said, you need to go over to South Africa to understand the business. So they sent myself and a colleague to South Africa and also to Botswana and Namibia. And as part of the process, we were looking at some of the security around some of their activities. And they said, do you want to go on one of the diamond runs that we run the diamonds into the airport? And we said, yeah, that'd be good to see how that operates. So myself and a colleague turned up with our sort of pen and pad, ready to sort of take notes and see what was going on. And we were greeted by 6 security guards with Kalashnikovs. We had to jump into an armoured vehicle to make the journey to the airport. We then found out that there was concerns about the convoy, which was transferring the diamonds from the offices to the airport, would come under attack at any point in time. So we felt a bit underplayed in terms of our pen and our pencil, our pen and our pad, rather than having any arms that we could utilise, but sort of brought it home in terms of dealing with a real sort of business situation that could be quite a threatening situation. On the resilience side, I think what I found from a personal perspective is that as you build up knowledge and experience, you sort of build up that resilience to be able to deal with different situations and to be able to cope with things thrown at you. And I think I've always also worked from the basis that you need to be positive in your outlook and you need to be positive in how you deal with things. So I've always sort of felt that I'm able to cope with different situations and provide that sort of resilience on the basis of really tapping into that knowledge and experience that I've been able to establish over a period of time, and feel that whilst things can be thrown at you, there's always an ability to work things through, and particularly working through with people. I think making sure there's good understanding of situations and how you need to manage particular areas in particular.
No, thanks for that. That gives a great insight, much appreciated. And going out to South Africa and working with diamonds is a day in the life of a risk consultant, isn't it? Having to adapt and absorb and adapt to change and work along there. So yeah, thank you. Let's move on now to the few questions that we're going to focus on around the non-exec directors' roles and how that fits in corporate governance. It's going to be really interesting for a lot of people. So really the first question we want to get into is, where does risk fit into the overall approach to corporate governance?
I think if you look at how risk is positioned, when you look at the various codes of governance, risk is fairly central to a consideration of how an organisation will consider the risks that it faces. And I think if you look at all the different codes and principles that are laid out, so you've got the sort of the main code in the UK for UK PLC. You've got the QCA code, which has now been in operation for some time, which is looking at smaller listed companies and growth companies. You've got the weights principles, which is very much focused on larger private companies. And all of these codes and main principles do feature a consideration of how an organisation and how boards in particular are looking at risk management activities across the organisation. How does risk balance against the control environment? How do we make sure that the board is on the right page in terms of putting in place the right processes and the right approach to manage risk? And interesting how the weights principles, which came through back in 2018, also brought to the fore the need to think about both opportunity and risk, and they actually put that into the heading in terms of how organisations should be considering risk. And I think whilst a lot of people are talking about it, they do struggle with the sort of the positive side of risk in particular.
Yeah, that's interesting. The last interview I did was with Fiona Davidge, who leads in ISO 31000, and that is already in there. Opportunities within risk, but maximising opportunities and minimising threats is often the language that I use. The balance of risk management to seek risk, to look for risk, and that is definitely coming through in lots of different codes and lots of different best practice around the world. So, how do you see that working in operation? Then, do you see much more opportunity type language, upside risk being discussed at that higher level than maybe you would see at the operational side?
I think you see the language being used, but I'm not too sure that the action is there to that extent. I think the key thing with this, also linking into governance, is it should be seen to be a strategic activity as much as anything else. I think the problem with risk, quite often, it's seen to be compliance driven. And I think from a board perspective, if you can make sure there's a clear understanding of what risk is seeking to achieve in terms of that understanding of anything that's going to take you away from achieving your objectives, then it seems to be a strategic activity and gains a lot more recognition, I think, at boardroom. But I think what we also find is quite often a top-down and a bottom-up element to risk. So the top-down is very much strategic, but the bottom-up is more the operational day-to-day activities. And the problem is the two don't always align, the two don't always sort of come together. There's quite often a black hole. And I think also the communication doesn't always work. I think there's a lot of flow of information up to the board. So the board gets a lot of data, a lot of information on risk activities, but they're not always very good at then making sure that information flows back down the process to give feedback in terms of what's required and how they're seeing the overall sort of risk position. So there needs to be that two-way interaction and communication, which quite often I think is lacking. And that's where I think this opportunity piece again can feature in terms of making sure that people understand how they approach that opportunity piece, because you're looking at things in a slightly different way. And it's important, I think, that these things do integrate and provide some degree of understanding on both the positive and the negative side. And we're very good, I think, as humans in thinking about all the threats and all the things that can go wrong. But how do we actually provide that sort of positive spin in terms of the opportunity that needs to be considered as well?
Yeah, I totally agree with you with what I've seen and experienced as well. But obviously, there's various pockets of really good practice where that risk communication flows up and down, and everybody's clear on what the overall strategic objectives are of the organisation. So therefore, they can make more informed risk-based decisions at the right levels within the tolerance and within the appetite. So yeah, we can't go into that in too much more detail. But what would you say? What can NEDs in particular bring to an organisation's risk management activities, particularly with what you just mentioned?
Well, I think the non-executive is someone who brings an independent view. They should actually bring different perspectives that they've seen in terms of the business environment, and also their experience of risk management in other organizations. So they should build up a body of experience around particular areas. And we see that the NED in particular should be focused on a number of things in terms of linking governance to risk, to performance, to people, to strategy. So they should be sort of helping to pull all these things together. And they should also be able to provide the ability to really probe and challenge the organization in terms of how it's approaching these things. And they also should be able to consider some of the trends and to interpret some of the data and information that's being presented to them. So they need to be able to pull that information together and provide a degree of benchmarking against what they've seen within other organizations, and also provide that sort of diversity of thought in terms of asking the right questions and to keep on asking questions until they get an appropriate answer. And I think we very much feel that NEDs should, from their own perspective, have the right knowledge, have the right skills, have the right attributes, and the right experience to bring all those elements together. And I think with risk management activities in particular, you're looking across the organization at so many different facets of strategic, operational, reporting activity that you need to be able to go into the detail where necessary, or to take that sort of higher, broader level view that is required in making sure that the business is moving forward, that it's achieving its objectives, and that it's really creating that sort of radar of things that may go wrong, that or they need to get right. Talking about the positive side, that they need to consider on a regular basis. So bringing that into the boardroom and making sure that you get a richer blend of experience coming through, I think is the key element there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you feel then that risk managers or risk professionals make good NEDs?
I think they do, and I think there's a good opportunity for your next career step in terms of looking to take on roles at board level. And I think risk professionals probably underplay themselves in terms of not really sort of thinking it through in terms of what the sort of longer term career aspirations are, because I think as a risk professional, you are sort of thinking strategically. You should be financially literate. You should have an inquiring mind. You should be a good communicator. You should be a good listener. So all these elements sort of blend together as a good sort of NED. I think we've talked to the IRM in the past about promoting, the risk professional as the aspirant non-executive director or trustee, and we set out some steps that may be useful to consider in terms of do start early, do to actually plan and plot that sort of career progression. So make sure you're thinking about how you might move into this role. Start with some small steps. So to start with, perhaps thinking about roles that may interest you, areas of activity that may relate to areas where you work in your community or charities or other sort of types of organisations that can perhaps give you that ability to work within a boardroom or a committee situation. Do look at how you present yourself. Do think about rewriting your CV and the information that really sells you as an individual, because I think you really need to think about how you're going to add value to the organisation. Do talk to your current employer, because they may be able to sponsor you to take on a role at an earlier stage. We do run some NED development programs that can help that process. Do think about your networking ability as well. So raise the level of networking. Think about your past, your current, and your future networking through that process, because your networks can actually help you to think about the ability to define roles and to to think more broadly in terms of the types of role that you might be able to take on, and also think about finding a mentor, somebody who perhaps can help you think this through, can act as a bit of a sounding board, and can help take this forward. And that's where we can help. The non-executive directors association can help with that sort of process in terms of supporting you. And finally, I think, do think about some training, some education. We run a session with the IRM called KRisk in the Boardroom to think through some of the things that people need to think through in terms of the risk management activity at that level. We also run NED programs where people can come along, have a look at the role in a bit more detail, and help to fill in the gaps. You may, think that you need to pick up on certain areas and develop certain skills and experience. So we can help with that as well in terms of just understanding, what are your training and education needs, because everyone's got a slightly different slant on that. There isn't a one size sort of fits all through that process. And I know, Grant, you do a lot of work in that space in terms of helping people to think through an understanding, a broader understanding of how that transition may also be able to work for the individual.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of crossovers with the various work we've done over the years, but I think that's great advice and great insight, and I think that's us run out of time basically to get to that. But that's given us a huge amount of information in a short period of time, and I'm sure will help a lot of people, current risk managers, senior risk managers, and aspiring risk to the field of risk management and the importance at every level through the organisation. So thank you again so much for your time. Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Grant.